There are different people in and around ISKCON who complain that the Wendell-Turley child molesting lawsuit has caused innocent people to have to pay for the lawsuit. So this is a common complaint we get, that the child molesting issue resulted in a big financial expense for ISKCON, and this is the worst situation going on here. The victimization of children is not the important problem. The important problem is that so much money had to be spent to pay to the victims and pay for the lawsuit. So it's a big question, really, that we get all the time. Are these people innocent or not innocent? We keep saying that the innocent had to pay, but are they really innocent people? Okay, wait a minute. Let's start out by wondering, what have these innocent people been preaching since 1978? And see if what they're preaching is innocent. And what they've been preaching to everyone, including the little children of ISKCON, is that God's guru successors are often debauchees, sexual predators, molesters, deviants, and even criminals. So the people who are preaching this are the nice, innocent devotees. But how can they be innocent? They may be ignorant, but not innocent. Now, recently, a devotee named Prahlad came forward with the same argument. He said that the lawsuit is hurting the innocent. The innocent are having to pay. But wait a minute, why would innocent people be preaching to little children that God's successors are deviants? That's the first question. Now, Srila Prabhupada refers to the innocent mass of people in a general sense, but that doesn't save these innocent people from getting cancer or getting shot by bank robbers or dying in a plane crash or car crash or taking birth as an animal in the future. So when Prabhupada uses the term innocent, it's a very loose configuration here. It doesn't mean you have a license to do whatever you want. But he also says these innocent people are ignorant. So we would say just because they're theoretically innocent, they're preaching an ignorant idea that God's successors are deviants, and therefore they're not innocent. They're corrupting the morals of minors. They're teaching something which is incorrect, and making children then have a distorted idea of the Krishna philosophy. So we would say that it is the GBC and Prahlad's innocent devotees that has caused these children to have such distorted ideas. If we preach to children that members of a molester guru process are innocent, then we cannot complain later on when they end up having severe rebellion from such preaching. They will rebel. They may not agree. They may say, wait a minute, why should I believe that God's successors are deviants? We should expect them to rebel. It's amazing that we don't expect that. Yeah, they're going to rebel. They're not going to be happy with that. But worse, the GBC and Prahlad types are crying and upset that the handmaidens and people advocating the above-mentioned molester guru parampara and who preached that idea to children then had to leave ISKCON because of the Wendell-Turley lawsuit. Well, for starters, most people were already gone by the time the lawsuit started. The temples were already empty way before the lawsuit started. Who was left? I mean, when the lawsuit started, the Hinduization of the temples had already been going on in full swing. The Hindus were now running many of the Krishna temples. The devotees had left. So the innocent devotees, so-called, were gone. And the Hindus were taking over. And the Hindus really don't know much about any of this stuff. So, but they're not innocent either. They're taking over a corrupt institution without, understanding what was this corruption about. So, the people who are preaching to children that God's guru successors are often debauchees are the important and innocent people we want to keep in the ISKCON society. Why? Because we want that agenda to continue. These are the innocent people. The people preaching that debauchees are acharyas are innocent. Let's keep them. Okay, and that is how that deviant agenda has been kept up the whole time. They keep the people who support this idea that deviants are God's successors and remove those who protest. This is kind of what happened also in the Catholic Church. The priests who were deviants were kept. The people who protested were removed. And so what was the result? The result was lawsuits, scandals, bankruptcies, and so many other things. And the victims rebelled. The victims said, hey, this is a corrupt organization, so let's sue them. And they did. So you can't duplicate this process in ISKCON and expect a different result. You're going to have the same result. People are going to rebel. People are going to create lawsuits. Now, according to a therapist I spoke with some years ago, teaching little children that God's successors are generally debauchers sounds to her like criminally corrupting the morals of minors. She said this is a crime against children, and she even thinks it's not legal to promote such an idea in the name of religion, because that would be fraudulently misrepresenting the teachings of any religion. No religion would be teaching children that God's successors are debauchees. That's not a religious teaching. It's fraud. Yet Prahlad wants that process to go on and on and on and keep these innocent people in the process of criminally corrupting the morals of minors. Why does he want that? It's inexplicable. We want to keep corrupting the morals of minors. Now, another thing is that Prahlad and others have complained, well, the Turley lawsuit was the only lawsuit that could be made on this issue. No. Anybody at any time could make another lawsuit suing the GBC for fraud, for criminally misrepresenting the teachings of Krishna. Krishna does not teach that his successors are debauchees. That's not what he teaches. It's fraud to teach that. Anybody can make a lawsuit like that at any time. Are any of these critics going to make that lawsuit? Well, no. They're just making a lot of noise, but that's all. Now, one of the things that happened was that ISKCON people began to complain about my income, my source of income, that I was driving a taxi. It just so happens that Jayananda also was driving a taxi when Prabhupada was here, and Prabhupada approved of his driving a taxi. Yes, driving a taxi, you're driving around drug dealers and gangsters and millionaire business people and people going to parties, people buying alcohol, people buying meat, people going to the hamburger store, everything. So that's true, but it's a source of income that we had at the time. Me and Sulochan were using my taxi driving money, and I was helping Sulochan. Every once in a while, I would take him to the canned food warehouse and buy him a can of beans and stuff like that. So he had no real source of income. I was helping him out by giving him food. I would take him to the thrift store and buying him a pair of jeans and things like that. So we had a very meager income, but keep in mind, we're fighting $1 million operation, a multi-million-dollar program that has banning, beating, molesting, murder, bogus lawsuits, and all kinds of crimes are going on here. A couple guys with a taxi driver income are trying to resist that and, oppose that and even try to take it down. Good luck with that. But, we had no resources. But the little resources we had was being attacked by ISKCON people, and of course by Prahlad, Sanat Mukunda Prahlad group. They also put on their website, oh, why is Pranjan got a taxi driver income? That's a very sinful income. So what that really means is we shouldn't be having any income. We shouldn't be having any protest, in other words. It's a way of chopping the legs off of our protest. It means we will have no income. Me and Sulochan will be going to computer school to get a better income. We won't be protesting, and then the banning, the beating, the molesting, the murders, everything else will just go on and on and on without any resistance. That's really what this is all about. But now if you look at the Sanat Mukunda Prahlad HKC Jaipur group, and what they're advertising is Bhaktidas. Now Bhaktidas is their idea of a good income. He's a great guy. We shouldn't listen to Pranjan. He has a bad income. We should listen to Bhaktidas. He's a great guy who has a good income. What is his income? Well,
he was selling millions and millions of dollars of designer drugs. And designer drugs are very dangerous for people. They make people go crazy, commit crimes. They cause birth defects. They cause spontaneous abortions. I mean, I have a friend, his wife is a nurse, and she said designer drugs are horrible. They create all kinds of problems. And, sometimes they can't even solve these problems when the people come in as a patient in the hospital because they don't know what kind of chemicals were in this drug and all the rest of it. So they have a difficult time with these drugs. They're very dangerous. And Sulochana thought that Bhaktidas was also working with a distribution group that was part of New Vrindavan. Sulochana told me he thought Bhaktidas was working with the New Vrindavan drug-selling program that was going on at the time, at least according to Sulochana. So Bhaktidas has got what I would call a bad income. And they're publicly advertising Bhaktidas as their example. He's their model person that we all have to listen to. And he's a great guy because he's got a designer drugs business, which was busted by the FBI. So his business is busted by the FBI. That's in all the newspapers, And then Bhaktidas is out on bail and he flees the country. He goes to Puri, where he's arrested for some kind of sex crimes. Oh boy, so here's a person we have to listen to. We have to sit down and listen to a guy who's selling designer drugs. Then he gets arrested for sex crimes. And Bhaktidas personally told me he was having sex with all kinds of women in Bangkok. So, again, this is a guy we have to listen to. He's an authority. And why is he an authority? Because he is against what we're doing. And what are we doing? We're trying to stop child molesting. We're trying to stop murders. We're trying to stop crimes. And Bhaktidas, well, he is himself a criminal. So no wonder he's against what we're doing, because we are against his agenda. It's an agenda. It's a criminal agenda which is infiltrated into the Hare Krishna religion. And we're onto that, and we're exposing that. And the criminals don't like that. That's just common sense. But if you ask the average person, like, for example, I used to sit in a big line with taxi drivers when I was driving a taxi. If you go up to any taxi driver and say, hey, this guy Prahlad thinks that people who are teaching little children that child molesters are God's successors, he thinks they're innocent people. What do you think? Any taxi driver would say, what? This guy is a horrible creep. What do you mean? You can't be teaching little children that God's successors are sexual perverts and sexual predators and child molesters and criminals and drug addicts and all the rest of it. You just can't be teaching little children that that is an example of God's successors. This is just common sense. So that means that the average taxi driver has much more grip on spiritual realization than these GBC people, Sanat, Mukunda, Prahlad, ever will. Ever will. Or at least that's the way it looks at the present time. How many people agree that little children should be taught that deviants are God's successors, and that is being taught by innocent people? That's what Prahlad says. These are innocent people who are teaching this to little children. How many people agree? Now, at the same time, I do agree in principle that a lot of the people teaching that are innocent in a certain sense, because they don't really realize what they're preaching specifically. They're just saying you have to worship a GBC guru, and they don't realize that this GBC guru program is part of molesting and crimes and all the rest of it. They don't see the connection. So they're ignorant, but they're not innocent. Just because you're ignorant does not make you innocent. So it's just like eating hamburgers. People eat hamburgers. They're innocent because they don't really realize the ramifications of eating hamburgers. That this is causing pain to another being, that there's going to be karma for them and all that. So they're innocent in a certain sense, but that doesn't save them from the reaction. And the reaction is they get cancer and so many illnesses from eating meat, and they may die from that or suffer from that, and so on and so forth. It doesn't save them. Ignorance doesn't save a person from, the reaction to bad activity. And if we look at ISKCON, we see there's a reaction. The reaction is ISKCON went bankrupt. ISKCON became empty of people. So many problems happened for ISKCON because so many people just swept these problems under the carpet and didn't deal with these issues. And this allowed a kind of criminal atmosphere to evolve and develop. And people like us who are trying to correct these criminal processes going on were being squashed and put down and all the rest of it. So that enabled and empowered the criminal element to, catapult themselves forward as the big authorities of the religion. Now, more recently, Prahlad has been advertising Rochan's website, and Rochan has tons of articles on his website decrying our idea that Prabhupada should be the Acharya of ISKCON. And Rochan was part of the 50-man Guru Reform Committee, where they thought they could reform the GBC Guru program. He doesn't seem to realize gurus are not in need of reform. And Rochan also said that gurus just need to have more control. The governing body of ISKCON has to have a tighter management control over the gurus. So making conditioned souls into gurus isn't really the problem. The problem is you need to manage them better. The problem being is that according to Vedic philosophy, the guru is managed directly by God. God is dictating to the Acharya. How can Rochan or anybody else start dictating to the Acharya? It doesn't make a lot of sense. So it's a little strange that Prahlad would start publicly advertising Rochan, knowing that Rochan's idea is that the Messiah from heaven, the Guru, needs to be managed by a committee. The Messiah from heaven needs to have a committee to control him. And when messiahs go bonkers and start doing illicit things, the problem isn't that you're making conditioned soul acharyas. The problem is you haven't controlled these acharyas well enough. That just doesn't make a lot of sense to most people. I mean, again, go to the average person on the street and say, does the Messiah need to have the control of a management body? And they'll just say, that sounds insane. So why is Prahlad advertising this guy in the first place, knowing that that's his idea? Then, on top of that, Rochan's link that Prahlad is referring to is naming a person who is one of the probably most prominent Prabhupada-blaming people around. He says that ISKCON is a criminal organization because Prabhupada was the leader of a criminal organization. So Prahlad is openly, publicly promoting a person who says that Prabhupada is to blame for all the problems in ISKCON. Then he wonders why the children and so many people are blaming Prabhupada for the problems. Well, they're blaming Prabhupada for the problems because you, Mr. Prahlad, are promoting the people who are saying that Prabhupada is to blame. You are creating your own crisis, then you're making pretend you're against that crisis. Well, why are you making this crisis in the first place? Now, one of the things that happened here, which is kind of strange, really, a bunch of the ex-Gurukuli victims were kind of laughing about this, is that Sanat used to send out a message to everybody all the time saying, I want everybody who doesn't agree with me to be kicked in the face. They should be kicked in the teeth. So a friend of mine was working with Sanat, helping him make a fence around his property. And Sanat was operating a post-hole digger. And the post-hole digger is like a big machine. It's a heavy-duty thing with a big gas motor on it. It weighs a lot. Maybe weighs 80, 90 pounds, I'm thinking. So Sanat hits a big rock with this post-hole digger. It comes up and just smashes him in the teeth. and actually smashes half of his skull in. And the guy who was working with Sanat thought he had died. He thought that no one can survive this. His whole face was crushed in, and then Sanat had to go get reconstructed surgery and all kinds of things like that. So some of the victims who were, not happy with Sanat's message that they should be kicked in the teeth were kind of laughing. They said, well, he wanted to kick all of us in the teeth, and he ended up getting kicked in the teeth himself. So, what goes around comes around. So I thought that was a kind of an interesting side story, Now, in addition to that, Mukunda, who was a big supporter of Prahlad and Sanat originally, was promoting this website of his talking about the Illuminati, and the Illuminati, the enemy of the Illuminati, apparently, the anti-Illuminati, the enemy of them is the Zionist bankers. And then eventually Mukunda just went completely into almost apparently worshipping Hitler. He's just become obsessed with Hitler. He's got Hitler here, Hitler there, Hitler everywhere, which a lot of us think was just a natural course of action. He's already going on and on and on about the Zionist bankers, and naturally that is going to lead us to the Nazis and all the rest of it. So again, people think this is kind of karma catching up, that Mukunda was very, very offensive to all these victims, just thinking these victims have to suffer and die, and the abuse should just continue, and the suicide should just continue. He is very heartless towards those people. So it made him kind of go crazy as a result. And this is actually part of the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, that people who are offensive, they develop what's called buddhi nasha. They lose their intelligence gradually. So that seems to be another part of what's going on here. And, some of us would blame Prahlad for this happening because he was encouraging Mukunda like anything, saying, yeah, Mukunda's idea of linking Krishna to the Illuminati thing is a good idea, when most of us thought it's a bad idea. And Mukunda has also said the same thing as Prahlad, really, that the Turley Lawsuit didn't really fix anything. Innocent people ended up paying a bunch of money. So, again, it's the same thing. Teaching little children that God's successors are deviants is being done by innocent people. They think that's an innocent program. Which almost nobody agrees with that. How many people believe that? So they don't understand what is an innocent person and what is a guilty person, or what is a good person or a bad person. They just don't get it. But none of this is really new. This is the same identical objection we get from the followers of the bogus GBC gurus. They say the same thing. Oh, innocent people are going to have to pay money now. These people are all innocent. You're victimizing the innocent. They don't understand that people who are supporting a sexual predator guru program are not innocent people. But there's kind of an interesting parallel to this. Even at the time of Krishna was fighting with the Kauravas, and many of the family members of the Kauravas were grieving at the end of the battle of Kurukshetra, and they were blaming Krishna for making this battle, and they said, you've made all of us innocent people suffer by encouraging this war. So even way back then, when Krishna was here, people thought that anyone participating in a corrupt regime, unknowingly or unwittingly, is innocent. But that's not the case. It was their duty to understand that the Kaurava empire was corrupt, and they should not have participated, and they should not have supported that regime. Again, same idea, innocent seemingly or apparently, but ignorant at the same time. It's your job to study what you're supporting. you know, and we had a lot of resistance even from people in ISKCON. We would go to people in ISKCON and say, this is a corrupt thing, there's child molesting going on, there's crimes going on, and they would resist. So they were actively defending that situation and resisting our expose of that situation. So they didn't want to, you know, move over to our side of the issue. So are those people innocent? Well, not necessarily. It was still their job to analyze the situation. Now, one of the things that happened previously was that Sanat was part of the Sadhguru program, and his wife was a teacher in Sadhguru's school. How do I know that? Because they both told me that repeatedly. So his wife is a teacher there, and she says she finds out that every single child in that school had been molested. Okay, and did you take it to the police? No. Why not? Because the perp or perps were underage minor individuals. Okay, but you don't not report a crime because the criminals are underage. I mean, there's a whole juvenile justice system for juvenile criminals. Just because a person is a juvenile doesn't mean he can behave like a criminal. You still have to go to the police and report that. My feeling is they didn't report it at the time is because they were protecting the real troublemakers who are the leaders of that school, like Sadhguru. They didn't report it to the police because then it would have implicated the leaders, Sadhguru and the GBC and so on and so forth. So again, are these people innocent? No. They have a duty to report these things. And if they don't, then they're co-conspirators. They're part of the problem. And then Prahlad, he's very upset that I caused all kinds of trouble to Sanat, which I don't see how I did, but in any case, he's still defending Sanat. But I have to give Sanat a little bit of credit. He did at least ask me at one time how many of the victims had committed suicide. He was like doing a body count. So I told him, you know, quite a few, and dozens more were on the verge of committing suicide. And he didn't think that was enough. He said, that's not really enough to justify correcting the situation. So he's just waiting for more and more and more bodies to pile up, and then that'll be enough. When there's enough blood on his boots, then that will be enough to justify taking action to stop this problem. But if you look at the ordinary world, if one baby dies in a defective baby seed, something's wrong with that seed, then the company has to recall all the seeds and refund everybody's money, and it's a big scandal because one dead person is too many in the ordinary world. They're not sitting around doing a body count. Oh yeah, let's wait until there's dozens and dozens more and dozens more, and then that'll be enough. That's not how normal people think. We're waiting for dozens more dead bodies to pile up on our doorstep before we're going to agree that this is a crisis. But, so it's interesting. Not enough people had died yet for him, for his satisfaction. But anyway, when the Turley Lawsuit was filed, the suicides dropped dramatically. And hundreds of kids were pulled out of that school system of the leaders. So hundreds of people were saved from being victims or potential victims, and the suicides dropped, and that was what the whole lawsuit was about. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the innocent people paying money. We don't care about that. We're trying to save the lives of individuals. So what this really means is that people like Prahlad think that the cover-ups, Sanat is a cover-up. He knew molesting was going on. He didn't report it. Well, he's just like thousands of other people who knew molesting was going on and they covered it up. Somebody sent me a picture of the GBC at some meeting from 30 years ago, and they said all these people in this picture knew that there was some kind of molesting going on. And they didn't do anything. They were covering it up. So Sanat is just one of those people, that's all. It's not a big deal. He's one of them. They covered it up. He covered it up. All kinds of people covered it up. Parents told me my kid was molested. Are you going to go to the police? Well, no. Okay, so it's a conspiracy to cover up this crime against children. And Sanat is one of those people. And that is why Prahlad identifies with Sanat. He's with that group. Let's cover this up. Let's make pretend this isn't happening. Let's sweep this under the carpet. Then we'll have more abuse and more suicides. That will be the result. That is always the result. Whether it's the so-called KrIshna religion or the Catholic Church religion or any other religion, you can't cover these things up because it continues the victimization and creates suicidal individuals later on. That is the pattern that goes on here. But one thing people also don't seem to understand very well is what motivates people to commit suicide. That's something we should think about as well. If you're telling a child that God's successors are deviants, then that person is going to think God is a horrible individual. God's successors are horrible individuals. That would make God also a horrible individual. So if you're preaching that God's successors are horrible individuals, which means God is a horrible individual, it makes a person hopeless. They become hopeless people. They don't think God has any good qualities because his successors are horrible deviants. Why would you preach that to little children? So this is my point. It's not innocent at all to be preaching this. It's creating hopelessness. It's creating suicide. Just the preaching itself. Never mind all the abuse and all the other problems affiliated here. Just preaching to children that God's successors are deviants is causing severe depression because it's hopeless. There's no hope. Why bother going back to God if God is equal to these deviants? There's no incentive to improve or reestablish the relationship with God. It's a way of blocking people from attaining God. And so the people who say this is an innocent process, they're covering it up. That's what they're covering up, this blocking process. This is stopping people from going to God, and they think it's an innocent process because that is a way of covering it up. And that's also a way of incentivizing suicide. Unfortunately, that is the case. Now, another thing is that at this point in time, almost nobody even is talking about the Turley lawsuit. Hardly anybody except a few people, like Sanat, Mukunda, Prahlad, etc. Very few people are discussing it because it's kind of like understood now that it was a necessity. Most devotees now say, yes, something had to be done. We had an ongoing abuse problem. We had an ongoing suicide problem. Something had to be done. No one else was going to do anything. So Turley had to step in and fix something to some extent. And some victims have told me, at least in Turley's hands, we survived. And in the hands of the GBC and the Sanat Mukunda Prahlad program, we would have died. We would have been abused. We would have died. And we would have been victimized. So better that we were in the hands of this Turley fellow, despite his problems. So what is the biggest problem people complain about to me right now is Mukunda and his Hitler program. They're saying Mukunda is linking KrIshna to Hitler is the worst problem we have going forward right now. That is the person who's creating the real bad name for the KrIshna religion. It's not me. In fact, it has nothing to do with me. He is the person creating a crap storm by giving KrIshna a bad name. So they handily overlook the fact that they've created this Frankenstein monster. They co-created this Frankenstein monster program. And, part of it was they were, getting Mukunda all hyped up about attacking me and all hyped up about all kinds of different things when it's just over his head. He can't deal with these issues. That's self-evident. Now, some people have also criticized me for going after the Hare Krishna community Jaipur, which is Dayalo Nitai's program. But a bunch of Dayalo Nitai's people were all jamming me with messages saying Prahlad is right and I have to listen to Bhaktidas. And they were sending me Prahlad's link to the Bhaktidas video. So, yes, I have to listen to Designer Drugs Pod, and I have to listen to a guy who's arrested for a sex crime, and I have to listen to people who are, going to Bangkok to have sex with a bunch of women there. And I have to listen to a guy who's friendly with the leaders of the Molester Guru program. I have to listen to that guy. And, Dayalo Nitai said this is our senior guy, Prahlad. He's our senior person here. Okay, so you're endorsing what he's doing, and you're jamming me with links to his program. So that means you're with his program. And what is his program? His program is that teaching little children that God's successors are deviants, drunkards, sexual predators, criminals, alcoholics, drug addicts, etc., is innocent. That's what Prahlad is preaching, and the HKC Jaipur people linked themselves to that wagon. Now later they tried to get out of it by saying, well, we don't know who Bhaktidas is. Well, then why were you promoting his link to me? You don't know, you're just promoting some guy and you have no idea who he is? Okay, well then that's your fault then. You didn't do your homework. That's not my fault. You need to do your homework. Don't promote somebody without figuring out what they're talking about in the first place. Meanwhile, you didn't ask me what the whole issue was about. You forgot that all you had to do is send me a message and say what's going on here, and I would have explained it to you. So you don't want to hear the other side of the story? Fine. Then stick with your side, and your side is that Prahlad's idea that preaching to little children that God's successors are deviants is the right idea and the innocent idea. It's innocent. That means it's right. That means it's fine. That means it's acceptable. Okay. Then run with that, if that's what you believe. But it's not my fault that you promoted that. That's all I'm trying to say here. Do your homework first. But I think as a kind of a summary to all this, I would just like to say that preaching that God's successors are deviants is what led to this whole mess from top to bottom. Saying that God's successors are deviants created hellish problems for the entire ISKCON society, including the children. The children were just part of the whole mess. Preaching that deviants are God's successors is why New Vrindavan was raided. Preaching that God's successors are deviants is why Jayatirtha got his head cut off because he started a designer drug cult. And he was having sex with some guy's wife. And any number of problems you can look at in ISKCON are all rooted in the same root, preaching that God's successors are deviants. This has caused all the mayhem from top to bottom. So for Prahlad and his pals to say this is innocent preaching, okay, then that means they're not looking at the root of all these problems. That is the root. You cannot preach that God's successors are deviants. It won't work, doesn't work, can't work, and it will bankrupt your society and ruin your religion and empty out your temples and everything we see that happened. That will be the result. That will be the natural result because it flies in the face of what God wants to have preached. God does not want people to preach that his successors are deviants. And if you preach that, you will fail. Your society will fail, and you as an individual will fail. Your children will fail, your schools will fail, your farms will fail, your temples, everything will fail because God won't allow that to succeed. He's in charge, and he will correct that, and he'll contain that, and he'll slow it down, and so on and so forth, which is going on. Every day we see that. Yeah, somebody sent me a picture of the GBC from a long time ago, and they said many of these people are now dead, and many of them are now gone. There's hardly any of these people left. So God is just whittling it down. That's what's going on here. He's not allowing this process to move forward. He is whittling it down. And it will continue to be whittled down. And whittled down, ongoing. That's all there is to it. But meanwhile, I think everything else is moving forward. I think more and more people are waking up and realizing, okay, maybe we shouldn't be preaching that God's successors are deviants. Every day I get a letter from somebody who says, right, maybe your idea is the right idea. We shouldn't be preaching this thing. Maybe we should just be preaching that God's successors are pure. Maybe that's a good idea. Yeah, hey, maybe you're onto something there. So slowly, it's turning around. We're getting more people to agree with the idea that God is pure, therefore his successor has to be. And of course this begs the question, who are the people who are preaching that God's successors are deviants? Aren't they what might be called demons? That's another question I get on a regular basis. What kind of people are doing this? They're preaching that God has a bunch of successors who are acting like devils. That would make God a devil. Who would want to preach that kind of thing? And why would somebody like Prahlad say that type of preaching is innocent preaching? Which means it's acceptable. It's acceptable to say that God's successors are devils, which would make God a devil, because they're trying to paint God as the devil. Or what? Is there a better explanation? That is the conclusion more and more people are coming to. That there's a reason that people are saying preaching that God's successors are deviants is innocent. And the reason is they want to paint God in a bad, evil way. That's the purpose of this type of preaching. And that is what more and more people are saying is going on here.
Now, another problem is that Prahlad and even Mahesh Raj and many other of my so-called friends, they're really against the Bangalore program. And whenever I advertise the Bangalore program here on my blog, they have a temple in the San Francisco area, then a number of these people criticize, so why are you advertising this program? But if you go to the program, you see there's a lot of young couples with babies and young children, and you need that. If you want your religion to carry on, you're going to need young couples with babies and children, and that's what Prabhupada wanted. He wanted to have a facility for children and young couples, because that's how you grow your religion. And without that, you can't grow your religion. Like the Gaudiya Math, they had a lot of old people. They were old and dying, and that's it. It was an old and dying program. And that's what's going to happen to our program if we don't have young people. So we need that. And the temple here ran out of space. They had to rent the building next door because the crowds were too big. So it's expanding, and a lot of good things are happening. And if you go to the program, you'll see all kinds of little kids running around everywhere. Why are little kids running around everywhere? Because it's a safe haven for children. It's a safe place for children to be. Nobody's worried about their children having some problem here, because it's like a family environment. Everybody's looking out for everyone else's children. And that's what you need. You need to have a facility like that. And there's ladies' kirtan program. There's Bhagavad Gita classes for the children. There's kirtan classes for the children. There's Sunday school for the children. There's summer classes for the children. All kinds of things are going on for children. So you need that. You need to bring the children up, because in 50 years, none of us are going to be here. Who's going to be here? These children. They're going to be grown up at that time, and hopefully they're going to be still there at that temple running that temple. And if that doesn't happen, there won't be nothing. You need to have people being trained now, because in 50 years, none of us will be here. Those people will be here, and what are they going to be doing? Let's hope they're going to be keeping the situation going on. Now they also have a farm, 80-acre farm with cows already imported from India, and those cows are being cared for very well. In fact, one cow had a medical emergency, and the temple here, they took the cow to the best surgeons at the UC Davis Surgery Center. They got the cow to be operated on by the top-notch surgeons. So that's the best care you can give a cow, really. So they're doing these things. They're training up children, and they're raising cows, and they're making temples, and getting people to worship Krishna, getting people to worship Prabhupada, getting people to read Prabhupada's original books, getting people to sing kirtans, and I'm not really sure why this is a problem. And on top of all that, it's a safe haven for children. It's a great place to bring your kids. No one's in fear or anxiety about their kid having a problem, because there are no problems with the children here. The children are well managed and well taken care of here, obviously. There's no stress, no anxiety about bringing your kid to this facility. So, of course, Plod doesn't like that. Here's a place that's a safe haven for children. It's a place where children are going to worship Prabhupada. It's a place where children are going to hear Prabhupada's original books. We can't have that going on. What should be going on instead? We need to have children being preached to by the innocent people, and the innocent people are preaching that God's successors are deviants. Those are the innocent people, and Bangalore is the deviant program, because the Bangalore program is saying Krishna is pure and his successors are pure. We can't have people preaching that rubbish, nonsense idea. That's not a good idea. Therefore, Bangalore is not innocent. So I see that they don't really have a better plan. They're going to burn this program down, supposedly, or hopefully. They want to just crush the Bangalore program, but they don't have any other program, so there just won't be nothing then. This program won't exist. They're not going to make a better program, then there won't be a program. And they think that's what Prabhupada wanted. That is not what Prabhupada wanted. Prabhupada wanted some kind of temples. And on this 80 acres, they're going to be making a new temple, a big temple, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of plans for developing the community. The community here is expanding. So that's what we need to see. That's what Prabhupada wanted. We need to make more people into Krishna devotees. That is the whole plan that Prabhupada had. And we need to keep that going on. Now, does Bangalore make mistakes and have problems? Yes. Do I have mistakes and problems? Yes. But every program has mistakes and problems. But we shouldn't be saying that each Prabhupada program should be airing the dirty laundry of each other Prabhupada program. Otherwise, there won't be any work for the GBC. The GBC won't even have to do any heavy lifting. We'll be in a circular firing squad killing each other off. They won't even have to kill us off. We'll kill each other off. And that's been going on. And now that's also a complaint about Bangalore. They're not really working with the Westerners. Well, what Westerners are they going to work with? The Westerners are fighting like cats and dogs as far as they can see. They don't want to get involved with that. And that's a good idea. Why should they? They should wait until we settle all these things down and start to do constructive, actual program development. And then when we have programs that they can join with, then we can talk about it. But at the moment, just everybody's squabbling over little issues. And it's just not making a cohesive thing that Bangalore could attach itself to. And again, nor do they want to get involved with all of the political wrangling that's going on amongst the so-called Prabhupada devotees. And a devotee just wrote to tell me about that, and he said the problem is that many devotees just can't handle all this information. This Krishna information is very powerful, and they get a hold of it, and it just, they can't handle it. It's too explosive for them to deal with. And I think that's part of the problem. In any case, there is a nice program here being run by Bangalore. If someone else can do better, they should. Let's see if you can do a better program. Let's see if you can make a bigger, nicer temple here. That would be wonderful. We're waiting to see that. But we're not going to hold our breath, because it doesn't look like that's going to be happening anytime soon. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Bol.